I've found that it's usually the little things that ruin us, the little details that go unnoticed or uncommented on, the destructive fine print, a subtle, seductive look between spouse and admirer, vows that seem so easy to keep that they are mentioned almost as an afterthought. We all understand why the bad, the poor and the sick are here. I think the words for the better and for the richer take a little more to understand, but we've all read about lottery winners wiped out by their windfall, or a successful couple finding that the temptations of their new status are driving them apart. But in health? I never expected this to happen. I've always been a person who believes in preparation. This was instilled in me by my mother. My father was a good man, one of the kindest and best I have ever met, but he could be short-tempered. From him I learned my perhaps overdeveloped sense of compassion. Kindness doesn't cost anything, Nate, he would say when we helped out in the soup kitchen or organized a clothing drive for our church. But from my mother, from the woman who always made sure that our household worked like clockwork, that everyone got there on time, that there was never any doubt about the solvency and safety of our family, I received deep gratitude. Thanks for the preparation. I have always been grateful to my parents for the gifts they gave me, for those twin virtues of preparation and compassion. Until the darkest moment in my life, they served me well. Before we got married, Chloe and I talked about what might happen in our marriage. We discussed what our vows would mean to us. We planned how we would cope with sudden reversals of fortune, for better or worse, how we would cope with having to move and leave our families, how many children we wanted to have and when. Specifically, we talked about cheating and whether our marriage could survive it. It's not that I didn't trust my wife and she didn't trust me. But she was an attractive woman, and I knew she had many admirers. When we met in college, she was a runner, essentially a star athlete. In high school, she set a state record in the 5K and was still an elite athlete. She wasn't the prettiest beauty in school, her face was brighter than anything else, and she spent her time worrying about racing rather than worrying about makeup or hair. But she more than made up for it with a long, slender, tanned and toned body, beautiful green eyes and naturally curly brown hair. I had no illusions about the chances I had with her, but we became friends in our second year. I know some guys point and yell, "Friend zone," but I never thought of it that way. I had several girlfriends, and since I treated them as friends first, I also had no problems dating. Women seemed to appreciate that I acted as if they were real people and not potential conquests, and there is no marketing network that can compare to a group of female friends reaching out to their single male buddy. The transition that Chloe and I made from just friends to friends with benefits to "oh, I think we're dating now" was pretty standard for college life. We were both dating someone else, we both broke up around the same time, and out of sympathy, we started looking at each other the same way we used to. It wasn't some great romance, but it worked for us. It's actually great for us. Despite our differences, or maybe because of them, we quickly fell in love with each other. Her persistence inspired me in my classes, my compassion taught her how to be a more generous winner and a more compassionate loser. She didn't believe in preparation as much as I did, focusing mostly on what she absolutely needed to do, but that was usually enough. You don't get up at 4 a.m. every morning to train without wanting to plan ahead. I joined her, although far behind, and my fitness improved as a result. The conversations we had on the road to the wedding, about fidelity, vows and plans, became easier when I showed her their importance. They then fell into the realm of important enough to be taken seriously, just like her workout regimen. By the time we got married, a year after graduating from college, everyone thought we would be a couple that would last until our golden anniversary and beyond. What kind of saying is this? Man plans, but God laughs? Our marriage has been excellent for the most part. Our early friendship provided us with an easy rapport, and the love was great, thanks in large part to her athleticism and my newfound stamina. We were experimental and passionate, and my tendency to plan ahead only reinforced that. One or the other of us would pick something we wanted to try, and then I would figure out everything that needed to be done and stock it if needed. She was very enthusiastic about the little surprises I gave her. There were problems, of course. She expected a lot from herself, and sometimes it bothered her that I didn't do that much. I was happy with my life and her and didn't feel the need to exhaust myself at work or in hobbies for the sake of some relatively trivial improvement in my skills or well-being. Chloe, however, was the epitome of drive, did not compete with other people, which was not immediately obvious. She only competed with the Chloe she had in her mind, the one who could always be better. I respected that, but it meant that she could sometimes be moody, disappointed in herself when she failed to achieve a goal. At times it seemed to me that she, too, was disappointed in me. Although such times were rare. We had a good life together in good times. She was ambitious and energetic, but we also enjoyed quiet time together in the evenings when we got home from work, after dinner, and after washing up. I was a software developer and she was a salesperson, and those jobs suited our personalities well. We would cuddle and relax on the couch, watch movies together, and sometimes even just lie in bed on a Sunday morning when I was able to convince her. But most often she wanted to go hiking on weekends. It was during one of these hikes that I first noticed the problem. Since they were supposed to be a form of relaxation, we walked at a relaxed pace and enjoyed the scenery. I rarely had problems with my grades, and she never had problems until that fateful day. Chloe felt like she wasn't getting enough air. When we returned to the car, she complained that her legs were tired. It turned out that she had such attacks from time to time, but she never thought much about them, explaining the fatigue by the fact that she was older and did not have much time to train. According to her, it wasn't important enough to bring up the issue yet, but I immediately became concerned. After talking about it, I asked her to make an appointment with our family doctor for the following Monday. He referred us to a specialist, who referred us to another specialist, and that's when we received the worst news of my life to that point. Chloe had a rare form of muscular dystrophy. Muscular dystrophy is not a separate disease. Like cancer, what we call muscular dystrophy is a number of different diseases and disorders that share the same symptoms. This means that treatments, age of onset, length of life and quality of life vary greatly depending on the specific disease. And when we determined exactly what Chloe had, the prognosis was not good. Her life expectancy was probably about 20 years, and only a few of them were good. She would see her physical abilities quickly deteriorate and she would first need a cane and then a wheelchair to get around. She will become weaker and tire more quickly, until finally her body can no longer support its own functioning. My wife died of pulmonary or heart failure before she was 45 years old. Any chance of us having children was gone. Her disease was genetic, and although she had 2 copies of the gene, even a recessive version would mean our children could potentially be affected by it. Her parents were lucky enough not to suffer any noticeable side effects, but the thought of passing on the disease was simply unthinkable. However, even if we were willing to take the risk, it was unclear whether her body would be strong enough to carry and give birth to a child unless we got there almost immediately. And then I will have to take almost full-time care of the child while simultaneously caring for my wife's poor health. It wasn't worth the risk and we decided to focus on improving her quality of life for as long as possible. No, if we didn't have children, we would never have seen our golden anniversary. It is the little things that often ruin us, a submicroscopic sequence of proteins, a small weakness that grew over time, a seed of fear sown by an inexorable end. Chloe tried to face it, we both did. She wasn't dead, and we were going to live our time together to the fullest. We were young, but I had already planned for our financial needs. We used some of that money to travel for a few months, visiting some places she had always wanted to visit while she could still walk. These were wonderful respites from fear, these trips to exotic places, an attempt to fit a lifetime of experiences into the short period of time she had left. We made love with a frequency and intensity comparable to our honeymoon, knowing that soon fatigue and weakness would rob us of this feverish intimacy. We never talked about it directly, but the fear of losing this part of us long before everything else hovered in the back of our minds. I held her while she sobbed, when she couldn't stand without a cane for the first time, when her long, slender runner's legs gave way as she tried to get out of bed on a cold winter morning. She slid helplessly to the floor, a terrible sound escaping her throat as she realized that she was losing control of her body and that it would only get worse. She was diagnosed just 3 years ago. Please, Nate, please don't leave me. I can't Oh, this alone. She held on to me tightly, as tightly as she could, but her arms were already weaker. The terrifying sound of her voice broke my heart. I smoothed her hair and kissed the top of her head. Shoo, my love. Shoo, it's okay. Never. In sickness and in health, until death do us part. I promise, Chloe. This caused another wave of sobs from her, and I could only hold it in until they passed. Then I helped her to her feet, chained to her new, hated companion, the cane. 6 years after her diagnosis, she could no longer work outside the home and could barely work inside. She switched from sales to marketing because she simply couldn't maintain the level of intensity she needed for the former. For a darker reason, she discovered that no one wanted to buy from a woman who used a cane. Image matters, and her image has become associated with the disease, subconsciously scaring off her potential clients. I moved to a new job, still doing software development, but in the healthcare sector. I figured that by being close to medicine, I had a better chance of getting her to participate in any new clinical trials, and health insurance was generally more comprehensive within the industry. It made less money overall, not because there was no money in the industry, but because I didn't have the option to simply move into a new industry when better financial opportunities became available. Our lovemaking fizzled out for 8 years after she was diagnosed, and she had been on life support for several years before that. She was not physically incapacitated at first. Technically, we were still able to have sex, but as our repertoire became more and more limited, Chloe's ego took a hit. As her body changed, she felt increasingly unattractive, adding to the damage. I did everything I could to tell her that I still loved her and thought she was beautiful, but it wasn't enough. In the end, I took care of myself manually and tried not to feel bad about it. One night, as we were lying in bed together, Chloe said, Do you want to see anyone else?" "Take it," she made a pitiful sound. "Take another lover?" I'd be lying if I said it didn't occur to me. But even if my views on infidelity had changed, which they haven't, there were logistical obstacles that made that nearly impossible. I suppose I could hire a prostitute, but that had its own dangers. The last thing we needed was for me to get arrested. And trying to date or even just hook up would be futile if I were honest about my situation. What decent woman would want to date a guy who was just looking for a part-time job while his wife is dying at home? Hell, even ignoring all of this, physically I wasn't that much of a catch anymore. My muscles got a little bigger from having to help Chloe, but that didn't mean I was toned. I had strong but not noticeable muscles, covered in a layer of fat due to my inability to go outside and do any aerobic work. This weight gain was compounded by the need to cook simple, cheap, quick, high-calorie meals so I could get back to work or caring for Chloe as quickly as possible. No, darling. No. I'm not going to do that to you. But. No, Chloe. I love you and promised to leave everyone else. That's what I'll do. She hugged me tightly and cried. I'd like to think it was gratitude, but looking back I wonder if it was guilt. Who knows? Perhaps it was both. 12 years after her death sentence, Chloe was permanently in a wheelchair, an expensive motorized one. Our house had to be rebuilt to accommodate it. We needed a van with special equipment. There are programs to help with this, but they are insufficient at best. Her illness debilitated us financially and we were mortgaged to capacity trying to cover expenses. I resigned myself to my wife slowly wasting away and dying, and then either declaring bankruptcy or struggling with a mountain of debt for the rest of my life. I would like to say that I bore it stoically, that I would have paid anything to spend another day with her, but I can't. Such a slow movement towards destruction, looking at the future without hope and the present with little happiness weighed heavily on my soul. I tried my best to hide it from her, to be as optimistic as possible when we were together, but at night I would sometimes drive to a secluded parking lot where I would sit alone and cry. This is not how I imagined my future. Our future when we were young, full of hope and deeply, madly in love. I still loved Chloe, but now there was so much sense of duty mixed into it that it was difficult to draw the line between where one began and where the other ended. I knew that one of the reasons I stayed with her was because of our vows. Because it was right. I had a sneaking, shameful suspicion that it was this, and not my love for her, that really kept me close to her. I didn't want to be one of those idiots who leaves his wife when she's sick. I had lost so much to this damn disease, yet I refused to lose my self-esteem. I know this sounds like a pity party for myself, and it was. I had to be strong around Chloe, try to be positive towards her. Her body decomposed at an accelerated rate, ending in an early, painful death. I tried to remember this, to realize that my suffering was terrible, and her suffering even worse. Chloe went from being a vibrant, attractive, athletic woman to being a wheelchair-bound burden to the people who loved her. She took antidepressants and a range of medications to help manage her symptoms. She saw a therapist. My wife had been through more than any person could be asked to bear, and I needed to compartmentalize everything so I could have time to deal with my breakdowns. But I still had them. Yes, her suffering was even worse, but it did not take away my strength. We started going to support groups around the time she had to use a wheelchair, one for her and one for me. Her talk was about connecting with other people with muscular dystrophy, mine was for their caregivers. We made friends there, some of the first friendships we have maintained over the years. In particular, we became close with Dale and Katrina. Dale suffered from the same type of muscular dystrophy as Chloe. He and Katrina had been married a little longer than us and were a little older, but they had experienced, on a level that almost no one else had, what we had gone through. Dale and I became fast friends. He was a software developer like me and was still working despite his illness. Hey, I've been sitting on my butt all day using only my fingers for years. What changed? He had a wry, self-deprecating sense of humor. I knew he was hiding behind it, using it as a shield from the fear and pain of the disease, but we all had our own coping mechanisms. It seemed to work very well for him. Within a few years, he became one of my closest friends and the closest person I saw regularly, something more like a brother than just a friend. His relationship with Chloe was different from mine, but perhaps more important. She almost gave in to despair that she could ever become the person she had once dreamed of being. He helped her see a different path, to direct her suffering towards goodness. She channeled her marketing acumen into philanthropic work, helping various muscular dystrophy organizations to not only have something to do, but also to rejuvenate herself. More than any of my efforts to remain positive, her friendship with Dale and his inspiration was the main reason Chloe did not fall into despair in the final days of her illness. Katrina and Chloe were friends, but not as close as Dale and Chloe. They had the least connections. Dale and I were software developers with nerdy interests. Dale and Chloe suffered from the same disease. Katrina and I were both spouses and the primary, and often the only, caregivers of our dying spouses. Katrina and Chloe were just friends who had little in common other than what brought us together in the first place. We each brought something to our new friendship: Dale's sense of humor, which kept my and Chloe's spirits up, my talent for preparation, which helped Katrina and Dale find places in their routine that could be simplified and optimized. Chloe's renewed drive inspired even Dale. Katrina was kind and quiet, which was welcome, but it was her profession that helped Chloe and me the most in the beginning. She was a massage therapist and I was desperate for one. As mentioned earlier, I became more muscular while helping Chloe than when we first met. When she was healthy, she weighed just over 130, but her enforced sedentary lifestyle had pushed her weight up to 160. It wasn't exactly dead weight, but there was little she could do to help, and moving that kind of weight over and over again, often getting it wrong before I had mastered the correct technique, was wreaking havoc on my back. Katrina helped repair this damage with long, sometimes painful massage sessions that loosened the knots in my muscles, leaving me feeling like jelly. She taught me how to use some of the same techniques, and with these skills, Chloe and I were able to regain some of the physical aspect of the relationship that we had lost, not sex as such, but intimate touch, which she and I miss so much. We were both deeply grateful to our friend for this. Kat even helped me on a more personal level, although not physically. She and I stayed up late into the night talking in person or on the phone. We became very close. Other than Chloe, I don't think I've ever had a connection like I did with her. We were two soldiers in a trench, facing an enemy we could never defeat, and trying to stave off depression from fighting a war together that could never be won. I have no illusions about the degree of our closeness. A few years later we had an emotional affair. We shared things with our spouses that we could never do, not only because we had no one else to share them with, but because we understood each other in our struggles on a level that no one, not even Chloe and Dale, could never understand. Many times we talked about our spouses, the pain they endured, and the humiliating guilt we felt because of our resentment towards them and their pain. Selfish anger that we will never have a life of our own, offset by impotent rage that our spouses will soon have no life at all. The voices in our heads that told us, no one will blame you if you leave, but also knew that we would never be able to live with ourselves if we did. The fact that even thinking about such betrayal made us even more unhappy. We talked about things we could never say to Chloe and Dale, and we trusted each other to keep these shared shameful secrets. We were, in our own way, as closely and completely connected to each other as we had ever been to our spouses, and this was a source of both strength and even greater guilt for both of us. It was an emotional affair that our spouses knew existed, although neither of us called it that. It was a kindness they did for us, their long-suffering partners. It was one of the few gifts of hope that could alleviate our despair. In the back of our minds we wondered what would happen when Chloe and Dale couldn't fight anymore, and they encouraged us to be close so we would have someone to turn to during those dark days. During one of our late-night coffee conversations, Katrina mentioned an opportunity that I had long since turned down. If Chloe said you could find solace elsewhere, then why not? I sighed. Because I'm not built that way. I need to feel close to someone. Connections have never helped me. She grinned, those sapphire eyes slightly mocking me. Are you saying that we have no connection? I'm in pain. You know, that's not what I'm saying. Taking a sip, I collected my thoughts, then, taking her hand, I explained to them. You are beautiful, Katrina. Amazing. Yes, we have a connection. If things were different, I would love to explore it. But I just don't. I can't go back on my vows. She started talking, but I broke through. Yes, even if Chloe says I can. I didn't just make vows to her, I made them to myself. Katrina smiled sadly, tilting her head to the side. She's so lucky to have you, Nate. I wish things were different. The one I wanted to be with. And now you're here, and, she shook her head and brought my hand to her lips. Maybe another life. We were entering the final stage of our spouse's illness, 15 years after they made the prognosis, and we both knew it. Another life could come sooner than we thought, but it was disgusting to openly admit it. I'm not saying we bided our time, waiting for this invisible monster to take our spouses, we were just friends and always behaved decently towards each other. But we also both knew that, rightly or wrongly, our lives would change very quickly in a short time. And then they did change, but not in the way any of us might have expected. A miracle happened. A technology called CRISPR has shown great promise in treating a number of genetically based diseases. This made it possible to directly edit genes causing problems, essentially correcting the body's source code. It had been used successfully to treat other forms of muscular dystrophy, but we didn't hold out hope that the treatment would even make it to the experimental stages of trials for Chloe and Dale's type until it was too late. Their type was one of the rarest and was far down the priority list. But, as often happens in modern medicine, the confluence of money and power changed priorities. The wife of a research prodigy was diagnosed, son of a famous venture capitalist, granddaughter of an influential senator. With these personal tragedies came funding and fame, and breakthrough followed much faster than any of us could have expected. Experimental tests have begun. My time in the healthcare industry and all the connections that came with it paid off. I managed to persuade Chloe and Dale. When I say it was a miracle, I don't just mean that the treatment happened so quickly. I mean it was incredibly effective. Within a month of starting treatment, Chloe worked with a physical therapist to get back on the cane. Within 3 months she could walk without assistance. And 6 months later she was back on the track for the first time in almost 15 years. Dale's recovery was just as fast, and we all celebrated our victory over this ghost that had haunted our lives for a decade and a half. Our friendship grew even closer as we slowly ventured back into the world in a way neither of us had been able to do in years, dining, drinking, and dancing in a way neither of us ever thought we'd do again. Katrina and I were slightly embarrassed by our ideas of what could have been, seeing them as a disappointing mistake in a period of weakness when we were both at our limit. Nothing happened, but the fact that we even talked about it as a possibility felt like a betrayal. When I made love to Chloe for the first time in almost 10 years, it was tentative and unsure. I had gotten so used to the idea that I could hurt her by mismanipulating a limb when she was too weak to push against me that I still hadn't fully grasped that she was strong again. But once we got past those first awkward touches, we fell headlong into the physical love that we had both been denied for too long. When we finished the first time, there were tears in her eyes as she clung to me. I missed it, I missed you so much, Nate. I never thought, she cried openly. I never even dreamed that we could do this again. That I can become the wife you deserve. You, she stroked my face lovingly. I could never have gotten through this without you. You were. God, baby, I don't know how you could be so strong. I love you, Nathan. I will love you. Forever. I wish I could say we made love every night and fucked every morning. I wish I could, but the reality of my sexual performance while still under 40, the back injuries I sustained while caring for her, and a body that had been neglected due to poor diet and lack of exercise meant that we couldn't maintain the level of sexual commitment that we both craved. As Chloe's recovery continued, she ran. It was then that we learned exactly how much the disease had taken from her and how long it had lasted. She was fast, and over long distances she was as fast as she was in college. The disease had probably afflicted her since she was a teenager without anyone realizing it. We both suspected that she could have become an Olympic champion if treatment had been available then. The realization that the disease had robbed her not only of the previous 16 years, but also of the person she might once have been, was a devastating blow. For someone who was so passionate, the realization that she had been robbed of such an opportunity for so long only made her tenser even more. When it started, I didn't realize that she had started pushing me away too. Chloe began training for marathons. I tried to join her, but I couldn't even vaguely keep up with her. Even before my back injury, I was much slower than her, and although the exercise helped me overcome the injury, it still slowed me down. She switched to training with the group. Make new friends. Seeing men's eyes look at her in a way they hadn't looked at her since we were newlyweds, perhaps even more greedily, given her body and stamina compared to other women over 40. Finally able to re-enter the job market, she returned to marketing. The time away from her had hurt her somewhat, but that industry had changed much more slowly than mine. Technology has changed a little, and technology too, but the basic skills haven't changed enough in 10 years to devalue her knowledge. A year after her first treatment, Chloe became a rising star in her firm. She was a rising star elsewhere, too. In the muscular dystrophy community, she was considered a shining example of what can be achieved with treatment. She was the light at the end of the tunnel for those awaiting regulatory approval for the experimental treatment she received. We regularly received letters from other muscular dystrophy sufferers telling us how her story had helped them maintain hope that their suffering would soon end, that they could become the people who had been stolen from them. It touched us both deeply, and sometimes I would see Chloe crying at our kitchen table with a letter from one of her fans clutched in her hand. I was the lesser star, the steadfast and inspiring husband who carried her through the darkness, but we both knew that I was a supporting actor in the public's version of her life. I was a little annoyed that I was treated almost like an afterthought. When she was interviewed, I would highlight a few paragraphs, mostly focused on how I supported her or fought for her treatment. If my suffering was mentioned, it was always highlighted in a way that made Chloe look better, or, if the writer was particularly clever, as a parallel between how my health suffered as hers did. There were occasional mentions of things I had to go through or give up, but only as a way to convey the overall pathos of Chloe's story. This sounds petty, it was. But I also suffered, knowing that I could have left at any moment, but did not. I knew that these were mostly feel-good works and were intended either for the general public or for other patients. I understood why the focus was what it was, an attempt to give hope. Detailing the realities of her husband's struggle was a distraction. It wasn't about me. There was so little. She traveled as part of her work. She traveled to speak. She traveled to marathons. All but the last were paid for by her work or charity. Her friends from her marathon groups covered these trips, wanting to take their mascot with them. Men seem to have contributed the most. Our enormous EBT meant that there was no way of persuading me to join her on any of these excursions. When Chloe was home, she was attentive, but this rarely led to happiness. Now that she was back to 100%, no, 110%, the version she could have been if she had never been sick, which she couldn't have been even in her youth, she had little sympathy for my pain and suffering. It doesn't matter that they were received in her service. Never mind that not all of us had the genetics, except for one fake allele, or the aspirations to be a star athlete. She wanted to get up and move, either literally walk and hike again, or metaphorically try to make up for the time lost to illness with nights spent carousing like a 20-year-old girl. I understood this, but it was not what I wanted. She made a miraculous recovery, But for me, there was no experimental treatment that could stop the slow deterioration of time, stress, physical labor, and sleepless nights. Nothing could fix the wear and tear my support put on my body. I craved respite from nearly 2 decades of struggle and stress that had seen me sacrifice the best years of my life for her, sacrificing my chance at children and a happy home in exchange for, what? The wife who was never home. A life that will never be dedicated to me, but always and only to her? Damn it, I deserved some happiness, and if her happiness wasn't mine, she should have submitted to my needs for once. Sometimes she tried. She couldn't stop moving, couldn't stop indulging that restless urge to try to make up for the decade and a half she had spent in a cage of flesh. Trying to make me happy, she directed it towards our bedroom. The pleasures of her body had been denied me for so long, and it was here that she tried to show me that there was a place for me in her new life, a joy that she would share with me and only me. Chloe was athletic and resourceful. There were things we had never gotten around to before the illness took her health, and which she had long wanted to try. But even this widened the gap between us. Her health was good. Mine wasn't, and it turned into a disappointment for her that made me question my masculinity. This disparity worsened as her sex drive increased, both due to our age and her improved strength and stamina. She wanted more than I could give, and the frustrating nights spent listening to Chloe's battery-powered friend pleasure her in the guest bedroom after I failed to meet her needs were deeply demoralizing. At least I took care of myself when she couldn't, quietly and privately, trying my best not to make her feel the pain of my disappointment in our lack of sex life. She didn't give me even that little freedom of action. I don't know if it occurred to her to try. On the night of our 20th anniversary, she had just returned from a 2-week trip. A couple of work trips with a marathon in between culminated in a weekend that served as a source of inspiration for people living with muscular dystrophy, anywhere. I had long since lost interest in the details because she didn't seem particularly keen to share them with me. But that night Chloe was home. She was beautiful. It was a huge milestone we weren't sure we'd see, and we both went the extra mile, gifts we still couldn't afford, a night spent dining and dancing as one pleases, making up for the 2 weeks of separation with slow lovemaking and vigorous fucking. There was nothing sexually interesting for me that night, this was rare, but she made sure I knew about it and took advantage of it. Every hole, every desire, every fantasy we indulged in, and some we never found time for, she gave me her body in any way I chose, fulfilling every request with enthusiasm. For the first time in a long time, my wife looked truly satisfied after our lovemaking. After that, she got into bed with me, and the sounds of our breathing filled the room. Mine was more ragged than hers, by then it had always been like this. I love you, Chloe. She pressed her face against my side, not answering at first. I thought she might have fallen asleep, but she finally said, "You're such a good husband, Nate. I hope you know that. I need you to know this. I'm so grateful for everything." I could never. My wife looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You deserve to be happy, Nate. More than anyone." She then settled down, hugged me tightly, and began snoring lightly before I could respond. Chloe didn't tell me she loved me. She said more, but also less. It bothered me, but I was so tired and so happy that I let the worry fade from my mind as I drifted off to sleep. My wife left this morning. There was a letter on the kitchen table. Her rings lay on it. There were a couple of folders at the bottom. With a trembling hand, I took the letter, letting the rings slip and roll away, lost somewhere in the morning darkness. My dear Nate. I'm really sorry. I will never have words to express how deeply disappointed in myself I am. You were everything a reasonable woman could dream of. More than that. Much more. You got me through the worst thing that could happen to a person, and I know I couldn't have done it without you. I will be forever grateful for this. All this makes what I have to do even more monstrous. I need to go and live my life again, just for myself. I can't explain to you the depth of this need, Nate. I thought I was going to die. No, I would have died if you had not dragged me into this trial. One more thing I can never thank you enough for. But now I have my life and health back. I know we strayed when this happened. I also know that a lot of this is my fault. But now I see the opportunities that exist for me, and I simply cannot spend another 2 decades with you simply out of gratitude and the memory of who we once were. I love you, Nate. I have always done this and always will. But I no longer love you the way a wife should love her husband, and as time goes by, I resent you more and more. I know this is a terrible thing for me to say or even feel. But it's true. It's not fair to you, but neither is what happened to me. And I need to end our marriage before resentment turns love into hate. I'm not saying this to offend you, but I need to tell you to make it easier for you to let me go. Before I was diagnosed, I was already thinking about leaving our marriage. I loved you, but I saw that the goals I set for myself were not in line with what you really wanted from life. When we found out about my illness, I was so afraid to be alone that I didn't say anything. It was cowardly. I'm a coward. I know it. This letter goes even further to prove it. I couldn't even tell you these things in person. You're someone's perfect husband, Nathan. For a while you were my ideal husband. And somewhere out there you will find a woman who will be your forever love, who will be perfect for you and who will take care of you in every way that you deserve. I'm sorry it's not me, both for myself and for you. I hope you believe it because it's true. I know you'll probably hate me. I don't blame you for this, I hate myself for this. But with time, I hope this hatred will pass for both of us. You deserve to be happy. We both do. But neither of us would have stayed if I had stayed. I want you to know that I never cheated on you. I won't leave you for another man. I was tempted, and that temptation made me reevaluate who I was as a person and what I wanted out of my life. It also made me think about what I can honestly offer you. But of all the vows I made to you that I am now breaking, this is not the only one. In this sense I was faithful, although few others were. Please don't look for me. You are so smart and I know you will find me easily. I don't plan to hide. But I started a new job in California, and by the time you read this, I'll be on my way. I only took a few clothes, a few personal items, and a few souvenirs of our time together. I will never be able to forget you, but I want to keep them with me as a reminder of the wonderful man I was once married to, and as a reminder to myself of the cost of my selfishness. I deserve it. I also know that my illness has put us in a difficult financial situation. I'm not entirely sure, you have always handled these details. I leave it to you to decide what to do with the assets we have left. I took $2,000 from our savings to start a new life. Everything else is yours. I know you've talked about bankruptcy in the past. If this is what you think is best, please continue. In this letter you will find both the initial divorce settlement offer and the power of attorney. My lawyer was advised to give you whatever you want and to follow your lead on how to proceed financially. He works for free, so his time is limited, but he will help in any way he can. I know I'm hurting you right now. I wish there was another way. I hope that in time you will think of me fondly. I will always think of you this way. You have always been the rock I could count on. I only wish that I could be the same for you. With gratitude and sadness. Chloe. Forever didn't even last 2 years. I sat there for I don't know how long. The sun was high in the sky when I was able to perceive the world around me again. There were tears on my face, and my palms were bleeding from deep cuts scratched by my nails. You're a fucking bitch. I roared in anger as I stood up and overturned the table. Like a wild, wounded animal, I rushed from room to room, breaking everything I could, breaking our wedding china, knocking over tables and chairs, causing more wounds on my arms, breaking picture frames with my bare hands. When my energy left me, long before the rage left, I sat among the wreckage of our house, the wreckage of my life, and sobbed. By then I was bleeding heavily. I didn't think it was life-threatening, but enough to know I needed treatment. I called the only people left that I could rely on. Katrina? My voice was almost too weak to be heard. Nate? What's happened? Help! Please, Kat. Help! And then I lost consciousness. I woke up in the hospital. She and Dale got me there. The damage wasn't too extensive, but I would have needed stitches. My friends initially thought I was the victim of a home invasion. They believed Chloe was on a business trip and someone broke in and ransacked the place. But when I was able to speak, I told them the truth. They couldn't believe it at first. It was such a shocking betrayal, completely inconsistent with what they knew about her. But once they returned me home, I was able to find the letter and envelopes among the trash strewn around my kitchen. Katrina screamed, "That cunt! How could she?" While Katrina ranted and raved, Dale just sat next to me, quietly supporting me with his presence. It was a change from their usual character, adding a bit of surrealism to the proceedings. When Kat finally calmed down, she went and packed a bag for me. There was no way they were going to leave me alone in the state I or the house was in. Dale drove me in my car back to their house while Kat stayed behind to get cleaned up. She later told me that she tried to call Chloe on her cell phone to give her a very big and extremely angry opinion, but my soon-to-be ex-wife had already cancelled her service. I stayed with them for several months, only occasionally returning to the house to salvage a few personal items, my clothes, computers, and a few other essentials. Chloe downplayed the severity of our financial difficulties. I planned to talk to her about declaring bankruptcy a few weeks after our anniversary, not wanting to ruin the celebration with bad news. It worked miraculously for me. When the dust finally settled, we were left destitute and with a completely damaged credit history. Chloe had already rented a new apartment and a company car in Los Angeles, but neither was affected by bankruptcy. She could have just continued her life away from me. I was so confused when she left that I didn't even try to get an apartment before filing for bankruptcy. Getting a new place will cost me a lot more than just the first and last month's rent and security deposit. I kept the wheelchair-accessible van during bankruptcy. It went to a family who needed it in exchange for a slightly newer sedan, and they cried tears of joy. I saved them tens of thousands of dollars. It was nice to do something for people who really appreciated it. Katrina and Dale were both worried about me. I would too, but I didn't even have the strength for it. I fell into a deep, dark depression. None of this mattered. Nothing in my life mattered, my compassion, my preparation, or my sacrifice. My wife survived, I kept her alive, treated her, and stayed by her side through everything, and all I got in return was the equivalent of a pretty boy followed by a cosmic fuck you. It was painful to be around friends. I tried not to think about what could have been, not what could have happened with Chloe, because it was now abundantly clear that it could never have happened. She was too much of a narcissistic bitch. But when I saw Katrina and Dale exchange little kisses and winks, a tiny bit of affection between two people grateful for the second chance fate had given them, I'm ashamed to admit that I wished it was me with Kat instead. That was the plan. This is what I was preparing for, even if subconsciously. One day Dale and Chloe will leave and Kat and I will end up together. Maybe. But this won't happen now. I looked at the second woman I'd ever loved in the arms of another man, my best friend, and couldn't decide what hurt more, that I was alone or that she wasn't. I tried to hide it. I was so grateful to them for picking me up and helping me during the worst time of my life. The worst time of my life, funny how new ones kept popping up. But they were my best friends and knew my mood. There was no way I could hide the pain from them. I was just trying to pretend it was Chloe. It didn't work. One evening Dale and I were sitting around. He tried to distract me from my work by playing video games. Now that he had regained his strength and motor control, he was trying to make up for years of classics he had never been able to play. It was a good way to take my mind off things, so I moved on. But on this night, like most nights over the past few weeks, it just didn't work. He said carefully, "I know you and Katrina, you had plans for what was going to happen next. After? Unless, when Chloe and I don't get better. Before CRISPR. Oh. Not really plans. It's just. We didn't think that far ahead. We were just trying to put one foot in front of the other." He chuckled. Katrina did just that. She and I talked about it, and I gave my blessing. He turned away. And I can't imagine that you, the king of preparation, didn't at least think about it. Slowly, I said. I'm glad that, no matter how bad things got for me, I'm glad you two are together. That everything worked out for you. I was. It hurt, but Kat was happy and Dale was happy. Even if I was left with the bag in my hands, I still couldn't wish them anything but good things. He smiled. They saw. But Dale still didn't look at me. But the offer is still valid. No. No. I couldn't let Kat leave me, but if she and you, he finally looked at me. We wouldn't be together without you. Without your support, we might not have even gotten to CRISPR. She was dying inside before you even came into her life. I don't know if she could have stayed with me until the end. If this offer would be a consolation for you now, if being with her physically would be, he swallowed. Everything is fine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What? Dale nodded. She loves you as much as she loves me. I know it. And I know that we both owe you so much. I love you too, dude. You're like the brother I never loved. And all the good things you've done have made you less happy, and none of us can stand it. Dale, I can't. Shaking his head, he continued. I do not want to know. I mean, when will this happen? I've already spoken to Kat, she knows you have my blessing. But don't tell me about it, okay? Do I know you? Won't try to take her away from me, he stopped, having trouble finishing the sentence. Everything is fine. If something happens to the two of you, it will happen. Without you, we wouldn't have each other. It won't do us much harm. I promise. My friend left the room, his face showing pain and determination. I sat there spinning in my thoughts until I finally got up, turned off the light, and went to bed. Nothing happened for several weeks. It was never discussed again between me and Dale, or between me and Katrina. I tried to treat it as an outburst, a sincere outpouring of love and gratitude that I would never follow through on. He loved me enough to offer it, I loved him enough that I didn't pursue it. But this détente was suddenly interrupted early on Saturday morning. My back was bothering me again, it never stopped completely. Dale was out, away with his cycling group, probably before lunch. Katrina saw that I was favoring one side. I need a massage? I opened my mouth to respond, but Dale's suggestion made me stop. Kat hasn't given me one since Dale and I talked that night. She grinned. It's just a massage, Nate. There shouldn't be anything more. I blushed, which made her laugh. Come on, you know the drill. I undressed in private, wrapped a towel around my waist and climbed onto the massage bench. She came in later. I lay face down and couldn't see her, but I knew that she had changed too. This was not unusual, she changed her clothes often so as not to stain her clothes with massage oil. I wanted to sleep even before she started, there was a Pavlovian association between lying there and the relaxation that I knew would soon come. As she rubbed the oil into my back, I could smell the aroma, a pleasant floral aroma with a hint of lilac. God, you have amazing hands, Kat. She chuckled, just relax and enjoy. So I did. She worked on the muscles in my back, kneading the knots and loosening them. I knew I was under a lot of stress, it would be hard not to, given everything that's happened to me. Kat had been giving me massages for years and knew where my problem areas would be. I think by the end she knew my body better than Chloe, all parts of me except one. Katrina knelt at my feet and I knew something had changed. I couldn't place it right away, as relaxed and unattached to my body as I was, but then it hit me, her legs were bare. Not in shorts, not in yoga pants or sweatpants, but naked. She was separated from me by the thinnest, narrowest piece of fabric, and I felt the warmth emanating from it. Kat. Shoo, Nate. Just relax. She continued working on my back and then my arms as if nothing had changed. I tried to relax again, tried to convince myself that it was nothing more than the fact that she had become more comfortable with me while we lived together. Yeah. This didn't seem true to me either. But it wasn't until she told me to turn over that I knew for sure that she wasn't just trying to give me one of those innocent therapeutic massages she used to give. She was wearing almost nothing at all, nothing but panties below the waist, as I knew, and above it only a short thin robe. It was tied with a loose tie, but her ample breasts still almost stuck out of it. Kat, we can't. She smiled at me, her raven hair spilled over her shoulders, her blue eyes sparkling with moisture. Her manner was kind but insistent. We can, Nate. Everything is fine. I love you. Let me show you, please. Her hand hovered over my towel. I didn't stop her. When it disappeared, she laughed. I was worried that you just weren't attracted to me. I think no. My hand reached up to her face, stroking her cheek. No, Kat. You are beautiful. And, God, so sexy. The woman I loved, whom I should not have loved, blushed at this, at the surprise in my voice, at the longing in my eyes. I wanted her so bad. I closed my eyes, trying to calm the voices in my head. This had the opposite effect. I loved Kat. I wanted her so badly, to take her and claim her as mine. But she was not mine and never will be mine. She belonged to Dale, and I knew it would destroy them, no matter what either of them said. If everything had gone as we expected before treatment, I would have loved her for the rest of my life. Now I knew it as surely as I had never known anything. But they didn't. And because I loved her, and I loved him, and I loved them. No. It was the hardest thing I could ever say, a single, lonely word. She stopped. Nate? No, Kat. We cannot. I won't. Sitting up, I also pushed her into an upright position. I want it, Kat. I want this so bad it hurts. I want you. I love you too so much, no, more than I've ever loved anyone. If things were different, yes, I would, I chuckled. Well, it's best not to be too specific. But I will love you forever. Tears began to flow from her already wet eyes, brilliant streams of grief flowed onto this most beautiful of faces. I carefully wiped them away. The words sounded hoarse with sadness and frustrated desire. Why? I smiled sadly. You know why. Kat shook her head. He said everything was fine. We were talking about it. We love you, we both do. It's not obligatory. I kissed her tenderly and lovingly, a dream come true, and then pulled away. What did you feel? The woman I loved looked away, her face contorted with shame. There's no way this is going to work, we both know that. She closed her eyes and nodded miserably. It was too much. There would be too many of us. There is too much to limit ourselves to the purely physical. Too much for her marriage to survive. She didn't love me more than him, I had to cling to this belief to stay strong. And I loved them both. I wanted them both to be happy. This once again meant that I would have to suffer alone. We spoke with Dale before I left. I made it clear to him that this was a mutual decision, that we did not go beyond the briefest temptation. The relief on his and her faces showed me that I had made the right decision. They helped me pack the car and hugged me tightly, we all fought back tears as we said goodbye. I cursed my father's lessons, the stupid idea that kindness was worthless, leaving behind the last people I loved. New town. New job. The new life I hoped against hope for would be better than my old one. A new future in which nothing remains of my past except suffering, the betrayal of the woman I married, the heartbreaking disappointment that I will never be able to be with the one I love. Denied any other comfort, I floundered in dark places. I spent the first year after moving out obsessing over my ex-wife, trying to find ways to hurt her and ruin her life the same way she had done mine, with some limited success. There were rumors that she would be one of the faces of the marketing campaign for the treatment that saved her life and ruined mine. The letter she left me was distributed everywhere. I paid a search engine optimization firm to show her in the top 10 search results for her name. That press secretary position never materialized, and her public appearances appear to have ceased as well. However, beyond that there was little I could do. I have been following news about her by checking her social media from time to time. When she announced her engagement to the venture capitalist, I made sure he received a copy of the letter. Despite this, they were married, so it did not have the expected effect. I was happy to note that they divorced a couple of years later and that he cheated on her. In the years that followed, there was some cruel consolation in the fact that what happened to me was by no means uncommon. Wags called us the crisper widows, a group of long-suffering spouses, mostly women, who had been abandoned by their partners when treatments restored the strength they had lost years or decades ago. The typical scenario that made up the majority of the cases was very similar to Chloe's, a sort of midlife crisis on steroids. Men who missed out on the energy of youth and suddenly received a copy of it years later decided en masse to abandon the women who had given up their youth and health to take care of them. However, as with many things, there was more nuance than this simple scenario. Sometimes the breakup was more like the one many empty nesters have suffered. Without a common enemy of disease to keep them together, they found themselves divided. Or sometimes it was a guardian, long dissatisfied with their relationship, but remaining without a sense of duty, who decided that they had fully fulfilled their obligations and left. The situation became so serious that the phenomenon was given a more clinical name, and family counseling was required as part of the protocol for various CRISPR treatments. It was too late to help me, but I was glad to know that what happened to my marriage could be prevented in others. A dozen years passed before I saw Chloe in person again, and for the last time. During one of my increasingly infrequent glances at her social media pages, I learned that she had terminal and inoperable cancer. I reached out to her, finally freed from the radio silence I had maintained since our divorce. Her response was immediate. She asked me to come visit at her expense. It was the little things that caught her attention again: the quickly suppressed warning about increased cancer risk due to CRISPR, persistent cough ignored, a tiny black spot on an X-ray that grew and spread before it was discovered. If she had never left me, I would have continued to follow up with her to make sure she got the additional tests she needed. Now she will die alone and unloved. Before the last meeting, which she, in her cowardice, refused me, I had to travel 1,000 miles when she left. I ignored her offer to pay, choosing to do it on my own terms. When I reached the correct hospice floor, I stopped, took a few deep breaths to calm myself, and knocked on her door. Chloe was almost unrecognizable. Even during the worst days of her battle with muscular dystrophy, she did not look so weak or sick. Death hung over her, a companion who, I was sure, would take her with him on a journey soon after my departure. Nate. A faint smile lit up her face. Thank you. Thank you, she coughed. For coming to see me. She croaked some more, reaching for the small cup next to her bed. I limped towards her on a cane, a cheap, floor-scratched metal rod with tape on the handle. My outdated, stained and threadbare clothes hung loosely from me, and she looked at me with sadness and worry as I walked closer. There were pieces of ice in her cup. I took one out and brought it to her lips. My ex-wife took it into her mouth with a grateful sigh. We never reached this stage before treatment cured her, but I knew the rhythms and patterns of end-of-life care from friends who died before a miracle could save them. There was a chair next to her bed, and I sat, relieving the tension from my back with a quiet moan. She spoke again. Nate, I owe you, a quiet, hoarse laugh that turned into a coughing fit. I owe you more than I could ever tell. But most of all, I owe you an apology. I shook my head. No, Chloe, you owe me 20 years of my life. But I guess I'll never get it, will I? I did not hide my anger. I think it surprised her. The very sick are so rarely exposed to the poison of others, even if they fully deserve it. Speaking slowly again, Chloe continued, I know. If they could be different, if I could make them different, I would do it. Please believe me, I would do it. Now it's easy to say. She sobbed. Please, Nathan. You have always been so kind. I don't care what you need. My ex-wife recoiled slightly. I am not kind or compassionate. I can't be like this anymore. You took my compassion, Chloe, you took it and killed it. You killed me with it. Her eyes became moist. No, Nate, please no. My voice was hardly stronger than hers, but my rage gave it a menacing quality. Yes. What do you think will happen, Chloe? You told me I wasn't good enough, that I was never good enough, that you made me look like a fool and abused my love and trust. I laughed bitterly. I used to think that when you begged me to stay, it was just fear of death. But later I realized that it was because you would have left me if our positions were reversed, right? She couldn't meet my gaze. I've never been as strong as you, Nate. No, that's not true. You stupid, selfish bitch. I took a couple of deep breaths. When you left me like that, God, I hated you. Hate you. But it was something more than just hatred. She withered away from me. You destroyed everything good in me, Chloe. My compassion? My wife lied to me for 20 years, and then. A weak answer escaped her lips, I loved. Shut up, you sneaky, worthless, cancer slut. I was afraid that someone would come in and stop this, my last moment of retribution against this demon in the flesh lying on his deathbed, and tried to modulate my voice again. My training? None of this mattered. Not a bit. I married a woman who I was sure was faithful and loving, she was not. I planned to create a happy family that we could raise together, illness ruined these plans. Everything I could to preserve our finances during your illness, we went bankrupt. I tried to surround us with friends who knew what we were going through, I lost them because it was too painful to be around them after you left. Through clenched teeth I hissed, I even planned for the future, planned for the possibility of new love after you left. And even this was taken F. Rom me because of that damned medicine. The medicine that I found for you is that I moved heaven and earth to make you available. You lived and betrayed me. Her husband lived, and I couldn't do this to him. And now the woman I fell in love with, the woman I loved much more than I ever loved you, is forever out of reach. Now she was crying openly. This wasn't what she had planned, I was sure she expected the years to dull my pain. That I would be the gentle and kind person who cared for her for the better part of 2 decades, and not this crazy ranting at her bedside. I leaned back, slightly relaxed. Not out of kindness, but out of fear that her heart would give up before I could finish. I left the city we lived in together shortly after you. Because of you I had nothing. Not a damn thing. You stole everything from me with your selfishness and cowardice. I spat, I wish you were dead. Chloe could barely get out, between painful gasps, please, Nate, please don't say that, If you did, I could at least believe that my suffering meant something. That they are worth something. I wouldn't have known you'd been lying to me for 2 damn decades. But instead, I looked away. Instead, I'm just counting down the time until I die. She croaked, you didn't find someone? I was sure that you would find someone who deserved you. You were so loving. So beautiful. You could. Of course not. How could I build love without trust? Damn, how could I build a friendship without trust? And how could I trust anyone after what you did to me? No, Chloe. The only intimate moment I had. Since then I've been with whores. Whores just like you. But at least I knew I was paying for their time, and they never disappointed me when they left. Oh, Nate. Oh God, I'm so sorry, baby, My gaze returned to her. No need. You can never call me that again. You can't pretend that you love me. You can't act apologetic and sad, like you have no idea what you're going to do it to me. You're selfish, Chloe, and you're a monster, but you're not stupid. She looked at her fragile, withered hands. I thought. You're so good. So cute. I sincerely thought that you, her jaundiced eyes cautiously slid back to mine. You have always been strong. I thought. You. Broken. Me, no one is that strong, Chloe. Nobody. I forced myself to stand up, mocking her. I wish I had never met you, Chloe. That we never got married. That I abandoned you when you were diagnosed. Nate, The grin turned into a growl. I wished for so long that I had left you crying on the floor when you fell the first time, that I had pushed your wheelchair down the stairs, that I had smothered you with a pillow when you were too weak to resist. I thought you deserved it, Chloe. I chuckled as she cried. But now I'm glad I didn't do it. I was wrong. You deserve to suffer like this for what you did to me. I turned to leave, limping and shuffling towards the door. Before opening it, I half turned to her. I hope you can hold on a little longer, Chloe. I hope it's the excruciating pain you feel as you count down the hours. Do you want me to be happy? Survive as long as you can." She howled as I opened the door and left. The nurse nudged me as she ran past me towards my ex-wife's room. Walking outside, I stood tall and straight. My back was killing me, my damn fault for that cane trick. It rarely bothered me anymore unless I did something stupid like pretend I was crippled to drive my ex-wife crazy with guilt. Well, I wouldn't make that mistake again. Before heading home, I donated clothes to a charity center. This was my vintage casual outfit that I wore while working in the garden. Marion has been asking me to get rid of them for years. It wasn't like we were fighting for money. A cane will also be given as a gift. It was my wife's ex-husband, but he doesn't need him anymore. I met Marion at the CRISPR Widows Support Group. She separated amicably from her husband when they separated after the end of their quarrel. They were still friendly, but the spark had faded. He attended our wedding 6 years ago and has been a wonderful parent in our lives so far. I had some notoriety among the widows, being one of the few men whose wife had deserted him in this way, and also one of the few who had expressed their displeasure so effectively in public. Each of them dealt with their anger and bitterness in their own way, and it was through their support that I found the help I needed. The first among those who helped me was Marion. First we became friends, then we fell in love as I learned to trust people again. Dale and Katrina were at our wedding. At first I couldn't keep in touch, it was too hard. But when I started a new life for myself, I turned to them. Dale and I still played online games together, and Katrina and I talked from time to time. Marion knew about our past, but she also knew that she was my future. There was no jealousy in it, only gratitude for the woman who had been my beacon during the darkest times of my life, and for the man who risked his happiness for me. Marion and her ex-husband had children before they knew he was sick. His version was recessive and they were lucky that it was not passed on. Tad and Terry were great kids, almost in college, and I had to fight the urge to spoil them. I didn't resist often, to be honest. What I told Chloe, in case it wasn't clear, was a mixture of truth, misdirection, and outright bullshit. I really felt all of this towards her: rage, hatred, and desire for her suffering. After I left town, I tried to find a psychologist to help me deal with the pain, but they all seemed to want me to forgive her. It seemed nonsense. How could I forgive a betrayal of this magnitude? This was not a spouse who cheated during a period of weakness or allowed alcoholism or depression to turn them into something terrible for a while. He was a narcissistic monster who stole half of my life. No. Eventually, with the help of friends in my support group, I found a psychologist who understood that different people must cope with mass betrayal in different ways. I couldn't let the hatred overwhelm me. This was my first goal once I stopped isolating myself from others. Ultimately, I wanted to find love again, even if it seemed like an insurmountable task. I was lonely, lonelier than ever, and I was going to do something about it. So, with my therapist, I planned, prepared, talked, and worked. The tool I found and forged for myself with his help was simple. I've heard the saying, holding on hatred is like swallowing poison and expecting it to kill your enemy. I couldn't get rid of the hatred, I just couldn't figure out how to do it and wasn't even sure I wanted to. Instead, I used a mental image of a vial, a poisonous bottle of poison with a green stopper in which I stored my evil thoughts about Chloe. Everyday life. But this simple mental exercise made the task easier and easier over time, until the hatred only came out when I intended to. And finally, I took this bottle and shoved it down this bitch's throat. I whistled happily as I walked down the street, basking in the bright afternoon sunshine. Soon I will be back on the plane with my sweetheart and stepchildren, feeling better than I have in years. Hatred could no longer be simply contained. It finally left me and the whole future appeared before me. It took me a while to be grateful for all the many little joys in my life. Sometimes it's really the little things. For those who are interested, CRISPR is a real technology that is being experimentally used to treat all types of genetic diseases, as well as to improve the chances of cancer patients. Small studies in 2022 showed that it can be successfully used to treat muscular dystrophy in a way that provides complete relief of symptoms. And yes, it does carry an increased risk of cancer for those treated with it. This is one of those stories that seems like it should be in science fiction, but it could easily happen within 5 years. I based many of the details about CRISPR widows on real-life examples of couples whose relationships break down after a long but ultimately successful battle with diseases such as cancer. As we see more and more chronic illnesses that were once considered incurable being successfully treated, I expect we'll hear some stories not unlike Nate and Chloe's. I hope there will be more of them like Dale and Katrina.